Chapter 22, beginning at verse 1, the translation is Balak, son of Ziphor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites, and Moab was seized with panic before this people because of the immense number. Moab was afraid of Israel. And he said to the elders of Midian, here is a horde now cropping everything around us like an ox in the grass of the fields. Now Balak, the son of Ziphor, was king of Moab at that time. He sent messengers to summon Balaam, son of Beor, at Pethor. Balaam, or Bilam, Balaam, you see the word Baal there in the midst of that. And today we have a very important parsha with so many facets, and the major facets of this parsha today, I wish we could have a good 3-4 hours of just spending on this one parsha, because it is so rich with so many good messianic prophecies. We've spent a lot of time on that in the past. Today, I'm going to skip or give just a summary of the first part, but what I'm going to focus in today is the idea of false prophets and false doctrine, because Balaam was a false prophet. And Balaam as a false prophet, and this is kind of a little pun. False, you could always tell false prophets because they always want false prophets. And in a sense, false prophets, as far as money goes, is what they're after. This was the downfall of Balaam. Now, Balaam was from Mesopotamia. He was from Babylon, from the same place that our father Abraham was from. And now 500 years from the time that Abraham left Ur of the Chaldees in Mesopotamia, here is someone that might have even been a distant cousin, a primo of our father Abraham. We know some things about him, that he followed Yahweh. He followed El Elyon. He followed the true Elohim. But like many false prophets and false teachers, and this is one of the most important things that we could learn. What is rat poison? What is rat poison? Rat poison is 99% good stuff, or else the rats wouldn't be, smell it and, wow, that smells so good. Oh man, that's good chocolate. That's good, whatever you like. But the 1% toxin is what kills you. The 1% toxin is what kills you. So rat poison, whether it's 99% good stuff, edible stuff, good for a rat, the 1% is what kills the rat. And that's one of the things that we could look upon false prophets and false teachers. 99% of their teaching, 99% might be good stuff. They might know so much Bible. But then they come with that 1%. And that 1% is what kills you. That's who Balaam is. Balaam knew Yahweh. He knew the Elohim of the universe, the creator. He might have even been part of that Semitic revival of Abraham and his descendants, and they heard of Yahweh way back there in Mesopotamia. But what we have here is we have the king of Moab, Balak. And he had heard, he saw, because news traveled that Israel had dealt with the Amorites and had destroyed this and destroyed that, and all these stories of Israel going through the desert brought panic, brought fear to Moab. And Moab and Midian, who were actually enemies of each other, decided to get into cahoots with one another, James. They got into cahoots with one another and planned this attack on Israel. Now, they knew they couldn't attack strategically, militarily, because they'd be mowed down. They knew that they couldn't come against them with spears, with chariots, because they'd be destroyed. They knew what Adonai had done to everyone else since they left Egypt. So they decided to do something. They decided to bring witchcraft. They decided to bring a spiritual attack, not a physical attack, but a spiritual attack against Israel. And that attack was witchcraft. So they hired, or they tried to hire, here it says that, verse 5, he sent messengers to summon Balaam on the river, which is Mesopotamia, in the land of the sons of Ammon, saying, look how this people coming from Egypt has overrun the whole countryside. They have settled at my door. Come, please, and curse this people for me, for they are stronger than I am. We may then be able to defeat them and drive them out of this country, for I know the man you bless is blessed, and the man you curse is accursed. What a reputation Balaam had. He had a good reputation. He was a blesser and a curser. In fact, that's, those of you that come from a Hispanic background, we know the power of curanderas, right? You ever heard of curanderas? And people, I remember even when I was small, even family members would go to curanderas. And they'd go to them and get curanderas for blessings or cursings. They'd go to curanderas, go, estoy empachado. Remember that one? Yeah, está empachada. And they'd go to, and they get an egg, and they put it on, they drop an egg on the stomach, and they do all kinds of witchcraft. So when you needed a healing, when you needed something good, you went to the curandera or curandero, a witch or a wizard, to get healing. But if someone made daño on you, if someone came against you, or you cursed them, or if you wanted that man and you really wanted him, you went up there and got a piece of his hair and take it to the curandera, and all of a sudden he'd fall in love with you. Almost every culture has this. Those of you, again, from Hispanic, we know it from our culture. But the black culture, the Chinese culture, every culture, the African culture, the Native American culture, every culture has their shamans, their witch doctors, all these things. In the ancient world, it was prophets. And Balaam was such a prophet that his reputation was, whom you bless is blessed, and whom you curse is cursed. He'd make a good curandero in New Mexico. So Balak said, come and curse Israel. I want Israel cursed. That's witchcraft. To curse someone using whatever means the prophet or the shaman, the witch doctor would use, that's witchcraft. That's manipulating. Witchcraft is about crooked. It's about manos, we mentioned several weeks ago, and it's to manipulate something. And so what happens is the elders of Moab come to, and Midian, come taking the fee for the divination with them. So they went out, and again, when you go to a curandera, you go with your $50, your $100, your pesos to do the work. They found Balaam and gave him Balak's message. He said to them, "Stay the night, and I will answer as Yahweh directs me." As who directs me? Yahweh. Well, remember, Yahweh is the Elohim of Israel, not the Elim, not the God of Moab. They had the Baals. Not the God of Midian. They had hundreds of gods. In fact, Allah is one of those gods of those peoples. False gods. It wasn't Yahweh who was there. Why didn't they go to their gods? Why didn't they go to their statues? Why didn't they go to their people? Because their gods are useless. Their gods have no power. And for some reason, reputation had gone out that Balaam had the power of blessings and cursings. By the way, Genesis 12:3, Yahweh says to Abraham, "I will bless those that bless thee, and I will curse those that curse thee." Always remember, only Adonai has the power of blessing and cursing. Only he has that authority. And we could walk in it or walk out of it. But here, here Balaam has this reputation that he could do that. So they bring money. And he says, "I will do as Yahweh directs me." And so Balaam, verse 9. So the chiefs of Moab stayed with Balaam. Elohim came to Balaam and said, "Who are these men staying with you?" Balaam gave Elohim this answer. Look at that. There is a relationship there. There is a communication between Elohim, Yahweh, and Balaam. That right there tells us he was a prophet. The fact that he's a prophet is no problem, as we're going to see later on where the problem comes in. And it says here, Balak, the son of Zippor, sent this message, "Look," and in verse 12, Elohim says to Balaam, "You are not to go with him. You are not to curse this people, for they are blessed." Whoever Adonai blesses is blessed. Who Adonai curses is cursed. You cannot curse what Adonai has blessed. By the way, you can't bless what Adonai has cursed. No matter how much you try to bless what Adonai has cursed, you can't bless. In fact, in the book of Jude, it says some of these guys that we're going to talk about here, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but it says, don't even give him a blessing. Do not go. You are not to go. Now, if Adonai tells us, do this, we need to do it. If Adonai tells us not to do this, we shouldn't do it. Here is where obedience to Adonai in so many things comes in. Obedience. Obedience. Adonai says no. And so in the morning, he goes, what verse is that? Verse 13. In the morning, Balaam rose and said to the chief, go back to your country, for Yahweh will not let me go with you. So the chiefs of Moab rose and returned to Balak and said, Balaam will not come with us. Se acabó. It's finished. It's over with. Whew. He's a good guy. He's following Adonai. I cannot go. And again, verse 15, Balaam sent more numerous and more renowned than the first. And they came to Balaam and said, a message from Balak. I will load you. Do not refuse. I will load you with honors and do whatever you say. Come, I beg you, curse this people for me. Balaam answered the envoy, even if Balak gave me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go against the order of Yahweh my Elohim in anything great or small. Now that's good. But there's some underlying tones in here. One of the things in Middle Eastern, and we see this also with Abraham, we see it with David several times, like for example with Abraham, when he wants to buy Machpelah, the burial place for Sarah, they're negotiating on the price. And he tells, the guy says, it's this price, but what is that between us? Oh, so they ask a question. They talk about something, but underneath what the guy is actually saying is, I'll take $200 for it. What is $200? But that's what he's saying. That's what I want. Over here, what Balaam is saying is, even if he were to give me his house full of silver, in other words, Balaam is upping the ante. Here's where the fall begins. He's upping the ante. And then he says, I can't go against the order of Yahweh my Elohim in anything, great or small. And then he comes back to Yahweh, and please day and night, and I will learn what Yahweh has to tell me. Well, wait a second. Stop, Balaam. Yahweh already told you. What did Yahweh said? No, don't go. Why ask again? If Adonai says no the first time, se acabó. It's over with. It's done deal. He said no. So if Adonai says don't murder, can I murder? Of course not. He already said don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't do this, don't do that. That's already a done deal. So he goes back to Yahweh. And Yahweh tells him in verse 20, when they summon you, get up and go with them, but you must do exactly what I tell you. Adonai, who never changes his mind, changed his mind. And we're going to look at that in one of the poems. Why did Adonai said, don't go, and now he said, go? Let me show you a little kind of an open thing for Adonai. And this is important for prayer. You go to Adonai for prayer, and Adonai says no. It should be no. If he tells you no, it's a no. But if you go back to him again, he'll probably say no also again. But on the second or third time that you go to him, he might say, okay, you want that? Go for it. Do it. Remember, Israel says to Adonai, we want a king. And Adonai says, no, I'm your king. No king for you. And the people came back a second time. We want a king. And Adonai says, no, I'm your king. They actually came back to Adonai the third time and said, we want a king. And says, Adonai says, you want a king? Okay, go find a king. And they found the best, the handsomest, the tallest. He was the football quarterback. He was everything. He was what everybody would look at a leader. Saul became their king. In Psalms 106, it says, Elohim gave them what they wanted, but sent leanness into their soul. Sometimes when Adonai says no, and you persist, trying to cajole like a father, oh, please, Papa, please. Okay, go buy the dress. Chita. It says that Adonai gave them what they wanted, but sent leanness into their soul. Well, over here, we're going to see that that's what exactly happened here. And so he goes with them. Now, that's not the will of Adonai. That is not Adonai's will. But they go. On the way, the pre-incarnate Yeshua stands there. There in verse 22. His going kindled Yahweh's wrath. And the angel of Yahweh took his stand on the road to bar the way. Now the donkey saw the angel of Yahweh standing on the road, a drawn sword in his hand, and she took off the road and make off across the field, and Balaam beat her. So here's the angel of Yahweh, the pre-incarnate Yeshua, with a sword, a drawn sword, just barring the way. And by the way, this happens 3 times. The prophet, the seer, could not see the angel of Yahweh. Remember, a prophet sees. A prophet is called a seer because he sees. But this prophet, with a big reputation of blessing and cursing, could not see, was blind spiritually, could not see that the angel of Yahweh was standing barring the way, and a dumb donkey could see and finally spoke and said, "Why are you hitting me? Why? I don't know how monkeys go, or donkeys, and how they talk, but we have a talking donkey here. But more important than a talking donkey, we have a seeing donkey. He saw. The donkey saw the angel of Yahweh. The prophet did not see the angel of Yahweh. Finally, the prophet's eyes were opened. Verse 31. Then Yahweh opened the eyes of Balaam. He saw the angel of Yahweh standing on the road, drawn sword in his hand, and he bowed down and fell prostrate on his face. And the angel of Yahweh said to him, "Why did you beat your donkey 3 times? I would have spared her," Balaam answered. "The angel of Yahweh, I have sinned. I do not know where you were standing on my path. However, if you are angry with me, I will go back." The angel of Yahweh said, "Go with these men, but only say what I tell you to say." By the way, here's one of those times where the angel of Yahweh is Yahweh. The messenger of Yahweh is Yahweh. Because remember, Yahweh said, go, but only say what I tell you to say. Now the angel of Yahweh says, go, but only say what I tell you to say. And so Balak learned that Balaam was coming and set out to meet him. And there they had a little conference. Verse 38, may I make myself clear to you now, the word that Elohim puts in my mouth, this I shall speak. And at this point, a series of prophetic poems, and in years past, we spent a lot of time on those. I'm just going to kind of go through several of them. And I want you to look at this. Those of you that have heard this teachings before, you'll probably say, oh, there he goes again. But for those of you that are new, this is what happened. Balak told Balaam, curse Israel for me. And of course, Balaam says, I could only do what Adonai says. Well, here's some money. I want more money. Here's more money. He gave him whatever he wanted. Now, here's the thing. What does a curandero, a shaman, a witch doctor, what do? They usually get their finger and they give a curse. They utter a curse. May your fields burn up or whatever. They utter a curse. And they usually stand on top of the mountain and they curse. They used to curse the cities or curse the people. In fact, not too long ago, I had some guy, I was going into a store, and this guy comes up and, he knows who I am. This guy's a pastor, and he starts cursing me and coming against me publicly. They do that. But here's what happened. Every time, these 3 times, and we're not going to go through all of them, just a couple of little things. But every time that Balaam got on top of that mountain, and there Israel in the valleys, and he gets his cursing finger ready, and he goes, I bless you. 3 times. Goes back, why did you do that? Well, Adonai put the blessing in my mouth. Okay, go back. I bless you. 3 times. I bless you. 3 times he went to curse Israel, and 3 times he blessed Israel. Go with me to chapter 22, verse 9. Yes, from the top of the crags I see him, from the hills I observe him. A people dwelling apart, not reckoned among the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob? Who can number the cloud of Israel? May I die the death of the just. May my end be with theirs, or with his in the Hebrew. So a curse turned into a blessing. And then there was a second blessing. In fact, in verse 20, the charge laid on me is to bless. I shall bless and not take it back. I have seen no evil in Jacob. I mark no suffering in Israel. Yahweh his Elohim is with him. In him sounds the royal acclaim. Elohim brings them out of Egypt. He is like a wild ox horns to him. There is no omen against Jacob, no divination against Israel. Verse 24 talks about a lioness rising. This is a messianic prophecy of Yeshua. Remember, Yeshua on the day of his resurrection says to the 2 disciples, Cleopas and the other one, he shows him from Moses and the prophets everything about him. He must have obviously shown him this prophecy. Because in the writings in the Gospels, this verse that says, Elohim brings him out of Egypt. I have brought my son out of Egypt. That's applied to Yeshua by the apostles inspired the Holy Spirit. Again, we can't go through all these things. Verse 24, 7, a hero arises from their stock. He reigns over countless people. Again, that's about Yeshua the Messiah. One of the best ones is here on 24, 17, where Balaam, who has knowledge of the Most High, he says in verse 16, says, I see him, but not in the present. I behold him, but not close of hand. A star from Jacob takes the leadership. A scepter arises from Israel. In other words, can you imagine? Balaam saw Yeshua. Balaam saw the Messiah, Yeshua. Here he says, I see him, but not in the present. I behold him, but not close at hand. A star from Jacob. Remember when the Magi from the east? Can you imagine if Balaam and all his sorcerer friends and all this, these words came out of his mouth. These words came, this prophetic word of the Messiah, Yeshua, came out of his mouth. The Magi, the magicians, since this time, I'm sure when Daniel was set up to be the head of the magicians, Daniel wasn't a magician, but the Babylonians set him up in this position. And Yeshua was being born. And Magi from the east come where we have seen the star. What star did they see? The star of Yaakov, this star that was prophesied by a false prophet, Balaam. And they saw that. And the star of Bethlehem was prophesied here. In chapter 25, we have an interesting story here that one of the things that Balaam at the end could not curse Israel. He could not, he was useless. He had no power to curse. Every time he tried to curse, the Ruach turned it into a blessing for Israel and messianic prophecy for us. And so Balaam by this time still wanted the money. So this guy was greedy. He wanted the money. So how could Israel be blessed if militarily, strategically, tactically, we can't do it? Now, witchcraftly, we can't do it. Demonically, we can't do it. How do we do it? There's a third option. Besides destroying them militarily, besides cursing them, there's actually a third option, and the third option is the most powerful one. Let Adonai do it. Let Adonai do it. In other words, whom Adonai blesses is blessed, whom Adonai curses is cursed. You cannot bless, he says, what Adonai has cursed, and you cannot curse what Adonai has blessed. And so, how do we do it? Well, Adonai says already in Torah that if you commit immorality, remember the blessings and the cursings in Leviticus? If you do this, I will bless you. If you do this, I will curse you. If you commit immorality, I will curse you. If you take foreign women, I will curse you. If you do this, I will curse you. So Balaam, I know how I could get them. And so Israel sailed in verse 1. In Shittim, the people gave themselves over to debauchery with the daughters of Moab. These invited them to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down with their gods. With Israel thus committed to the Baal of Peor. In other words, they committed themselves. They accepted, they rejected Yahweh, and now they committed themselves. They accepted a new God, the Baal of Peor, the spirit of Peor, the spirit of this land called Peor, and the anger of Yahweh blazed out against them. This is what we call sacred prostitution. They got involved in this sacred prostitution where with the daughters of Moab and the idolatry and the gods. And Yahweh said to Moses, take all the leaders of the people in Palim for Yahweh here in the sun. Then the burning anger of Yahweh will turn away from Israel. So all the leaders that were leaders in this idea of, now we will find out in chapter 31 in Joshua and in Ezekiel, if you follow we could follow those lines, that it was actually Balaam that told Balak, this is how you are to curse Israel. Get them involved with the girls, wine, women, and song, and Adonai will have to curse them, because that's Adonai's word. If you get involved in this, I will bless you. If you get involved in this, I will curse you. Get them involved in this. As long as they're doing good, Adonai is blessing them, and you can't touch them. But once they get out of the cloud of Adonai, out of the umbrella of Adonai, and get involved with their own thing, I do my own thing. Nobody tells me what to do. That was Balaam's idea. He didn't do what Adonai told me. He did what he wanted. He was greedy. And that's the way these people are. Who's Moses? Who's these people? And they accepted the Baal of Peor, of this mountain. It's a mountain called Peor. And Adonai was angry. Verse 6, watch how bad it got. A man of the sons of Israel came along, bringing the Midianite woman, a Midianite woman into his family, under the very eyes of Moses and the whole community of the sons of Israel, as they wept in the door of the tent of meeting. When he saw this, Pinchas, the priest, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, stood up and left the Kehillah, seized a lance, followed the Israelites into the alcove of the tent, and ran there through both of them, the Israelite and the woman, right through the groin. And the plague that had struck the sons of Israel was arrested, and in the plague 24,000 of them died. Balaam and Balak won. Israel lost. In fact, if Pinchas would not have done that, and the whole of Israel would have gotten involved in Baal worship at the time, probably with the exception of Moses, Aaron, and their believing families, all of Israel would have been wiped out. But can you imagine this guy? this guy gets his midnight girl, and in front of everybody, I don't have to do what you guys say. And he takes this midnight girl into his tent to do their uncleanness. Pinchas, the priest, gets a lance. And as they're there doing their debauchery, he sees them and right through the groin. And Adonai stopped the plague. Only 24,000 died. Only 24,000. It could have been more. Go with me to a couple of scriptures here. Go with me to the book of 2 Peter. And 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 15. Second Peter 2:15. It says there, talking about verse 10, actually chapter 2 is talking about false teachers. Verse 10 says these self-willed people. Verse 15 says they are under a curse. They have left the right path and wandered off to follow the path of Balaam, son of Beor, who thought he could profit best by sinning until he was called to order for his faults. The dumb donkey put a stop to that prophet's madness when it talked like a man. People like this are dried up rivers, fog swirling in the wind, and dark underworld is the place reserved for them. While their high-flown talk, which is all hollow, they tempt back the ones who have only just escaped from paganism, playing on their bodily desires with debaucheries. And so Balaam, this greedy man for money, now people in the time of Peter, in the apostolic times, were following that way. Go with me to Jude 1:11. Jude 1:11. Again, talking about false teachers. Begins in verse 5, but let's go to 11. May they get what they deserve, because they have followed Cain. They have rushed to make the same mistake and the error of Balaam. And for the same reward, they have rebelled just as Korah did and share the same fate. They are dangerous obstacles in your own eggs, coming for the food and quite shamelessly only looking after themselves. And so some of these, in fact, look at this. Jude is warning that community of all these false teachers, false prophets, and he even says they come into your meals, your own eggs, in those days they would call them agape feasts. We have some of those in our own eggs here, where people come, but they're only thinking of themselves. They only come, in fact, there's some people that, they don't come for the service, but when the service is over, they come in, they go sometimes get in front of the line and get all kinds of food, and they pack some of that food away, and then they're gone. And sometimes they even come over here, and I've gone back there, and they're getting some leftover chickens and putting them in their bags and then taking off. They did that before. They're still doing it now. Go with me to the book of Revelation 2:14. In the congregation of Pergamon, one of the 7 churches of the book of Revelation, Yeshua, and this is Yeshua talking, by the way, in verse 14. Nevertheless, I have 2 complaints to make against you to the church, to the Kehillah of Pergamon, to the pastor of the Kehillah of Pergamon. I have 2 complaints to make. Some of you are followers of Balaam. Can you imagine in a New Testament congregation, there are followers of Balaam? As I look over every one of you, I would say none of you are followers of Balaam. But they have come and they will come again. Who taught Balak to set a trap for the Israelites so that they committed adultery by eating food that had been sacrificed to idols. And among you too, there are some who are as bad, who accept what the Nicolaitans teach. Who are the Nicolaitans? The word Neco is above. Laitans come from lay person. They're the ones above the people of Elohim. And again, in some congregations, there are Nicolaitan congregations. A Nicolaitan congregation is a congregation with a very strong authority. And these people are above, the clergy is above the laity. And in the scripture, while there are clerical offices of pastor, teacher, apostle, none of us are above one another. We are all brothers in Messiah, even though our role functions are different and our authority is different. It is not what we would call a dictatorship. In fact, Peter tells us not to be a dictator over anybody's way. This is what has happened. This is Balaam. Now, that was only the introduction. This is the sermon. And I have how many points? Watch, how many points do I have here? We have to go, what? 17?
That's right.
Does that say 17? That does. How are we going to get to 17 points in 5 minutes? Well, one of the things that Adonai said, and I'll go real fast. In fact, what I want you to do is every one of these, as much as we get, and we do have a no-neg afterwards, so that if, you start getting, I might have to, my tripas start talking, I might have to send you to go get me a little, but anyways, Matthew 7:15. Yeshua himself warned us, beware of false prophets. Cuídense de esos profetas falsos, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravening wolves. You shall know them by their fruit. Do men gather grapes of thorns and figs or figs of thistles? Even so, every good tree brings good fruit, but a corrupt tree brings evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring good fruit. Every tree that brings not good fruit is cut down and cast into the fire. Wherefore, by their fruits you shall know them. Not everyone who says unto me, Master, Master, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name? And in your name cast out devils, and in your name done many wonderful works? Then I will profess to them, I never knew you guys, you workers of lawlessness. And the word there is Torahlessness. In other words, Balaam will one day stand before Adonai. Didn't I prophesy? Didn't I give messianic prophecy? Sorry, Charlie. I never knew you, you worker of lawlessness, of iniquity. Iniquity means without Torah. A person who is in iniquity, he is not a follower of Torah. Matthew 24:11. And many false prophets shall arise and deceive many. And because iniquity, Torahlessness, shall abound, the love of many will wax cold. Verse 24, chapter 24:24. For there shall arise false messiahs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, inasmuch if it were possible to deceive the very elect. Balaam had these powerful signs and wonders, prophetic words, and he deceived people. But let me tell you, Pinchas wasn't deceived. Adonai calls you guys to be Pinchas people, not with the spirit of Balaam, but with the spirit of Pinchas, the spirit of Moses, the spirit of Aaron. Mark 13:22. For false messiahs and false prophets shall arise and show signs and wonders to seduce, if it were possible, even the elect. To what? To seduce. Again, with every one of these, we could go through all kinds of stuff. Romans 16:17-18. Now I urge you, brethren, keep your eye on those who cause dissensions and hindrances contrary to the teaching which you learned. Turn away from them. For such men are slaves not of our master the Messiah, but of their own appetites. That's what Balaam was, a slave of his appetite, greed, and by their smooth and flattering speech, they deceive the hearts of the unsuspecting. In fact, we've had some of our lambs here, some of our little lambs here. When one of these guys comes in, and by their flatteries, by their speech, they sit next to you, they sit to this, and they start talking. They start saying, well, I really don't disagree. I really don't agree with what the pastor says, and they cause dissensions. And little by little, we've seen this over and over again. Afterwards, some of these guys, most of them are visitors here. They come, and again, many of them, as my wife and some of the elders could tell you, they usually pick on young ladies. And they get their phone numbers. We've seen them getting their phone numbers, and we've had to call some people, say, I warn you, please don't call him. Oh, no, he's a good teacher, and, oh, you guys are just being, you guys are. And sometimes the people turn against us, and we're trying to protect them. And then later on they call us, oh, I wish I would have listened to you because I got involved. Galatians 1:8-9. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, he is to be accursed. As I said before, so I say again now, if a man is preaching to you a gospel contrary to what you received, he is to be accursed. And again, we've had all kinds of people, and at the end, if I have time, well, let me just say them now. There's some false doctrines coming into the Messianic movement. And let me mention just 4 of them. One false doctrine that people come around teaching constantly is the dual covenant doctrine. The dual covenant doctrine is a doctrine that says the Jews are saved by following Torah, Gentiles are saved by the gospel. That's a heresy. Because I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me, Yeshua said. There's no salvation outside of Yeshua. There's no salvation in following Torah. There's no salvation in following the legalism, the Yiddishkeit, and all that kind of stuff. Salvation is only in Yeshua. The Torah was given to those of us that have been saved already. And the the dual covenant doctrine is even filtering into Messianic congregations where we have actually been told, and some of you have actually been told, why are you guys following Sabbath? Some of these even Messianic rabbis have condemned me because we're doing Sabbath service. Well, I thought that's what Torah said. And they're saying, you guys need to be doing Sunday. Why are you guys doing Passover? You guys should be doing Christmas and Easter. Christmas and Easter, they say, is not pagan. Those aren't pagan feasts, these Messianic teachers are saying. Wait a second, they are. And we won't follow Christmas and Easter. We will follow Sukkot and Passover and Shabbat, and we will, eat kosher, and we will keep the Torah that Adonai gave us. A second one is the lunar Sabbath. The lunar Sabbath, these people teach that the Sabbath is not on the 7th day. That the Sabbath is every 7th day from the new moon. So when the new moon appears, that's the Sabbath. You count 6 days, Sabbath. You count 6 days, Sabbath. You count 6 days, Sabbath. But a month has 30 days. You can't get 7 into 30 days. So what do you do with those 1 or 2, sometimes even 3 days in between? Oh, those are non-days. When the new moon shows up again, it's the Sabbath. That means the Sabbath could be on a Wednesday, the Sabbath could be on a Tuesday. And that's filtering into, we've had several of their ministers come in, and they come, again, asking questions. And you could always tell them, because they come to me and say, I have a question, Pastor. I've been studying this for a year or two, and what does this say? And you read it, and then they say, well, does that mean that the Sabbath is on a lunar rather than a Sabbath? And they try to, and so many people, we had a split here because about 8, 9 people went with one of these guys that came in here and took about 8, 9 of our people away, and they're all following the lunar Sabbath. Another one is the Ephraimite two-house doctrine. The Ephraimite two-house doctrine is a doctrine, simply said, that the European people are the real Israel. That if you're French, you're from the tribe of Reuben. If you are Irish, you're from the tribe of Dan. If you are English, you are from the top tribe. Anybody know where the top tribe is? Judah? No, not according to them. It's Ephraim. So we are Ephraim. So Judah, they're the Jews. They're at the bottom of the pole. Wait a second. That's not what Adonai says. The scepter shall come from Judah. And so the Ephraimite, they call themselves Ephraimites, or two-housers. If anybody comes telling you about Ephraim and the two-house, just tell them that you're not interested, because that is a heresy. The sacred name groups. Sacred name groups come with all kinds of fancy names, Yahuwah and Yashashia and Yahuhuhua. If anybody says anything besides Yahweh for the Creator, the Father, and Yeshua for the Son, again, they're part of the sacred namers, and they say, if you don't say it right, you have to say it right, Yahweh. And if you say that, your prayers will be answered. If you don't say it with the right, your prayers aren't going to. Well, listen, that's a bunch of malarkey. Let's go on here. Ephesians 4:14. As a result, we are no longer children, tossed here and there by the waves and carried by every wind of doctrine and trickery of men, by craftiness in deceitful scheming. That's what they are, deceitful schemers. Every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men. This Wednesday is a good example. This Wednesday we were here. In fact, I wasn't teaching. Our brother Geraldo was teaching. And we had a few people come. And one afterwards, one of the young men sat in the back with me and said, Pastor, I have a few questions to ask of you. Well, when a young person who comes with a big, thick Bible wanting to ask questions, that right there already is, to me, a ding, 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 ding. And he says, he reads the scripture, Matthew, Luke, John, 2 + 2 = 5. He tells me. And John the Baptist, he was prophesied that Elijah would to come. John the Baptist is born. Yeshua later is told that John the Baptist is the Elijah who was to come. Yeshua said we must be born again. He gets these scriptures in Malachi, in Luke, in Matthew, and John. He gets 4 scriptures. And he says, Yeshua, or he called him by another name. In fact, he was reading a Bible that I had never seen before with Yahweh, or I don't know what the name was. Really strange name. And I should have stopped him there, but anyway, I just let him go on. And he says, meaning Yeshua gave me a new revelation, or Yahweh gave me a new revelation. I don't know who he was talking about. Gave me a new revelation. He says, I've been a believer. I guess his parents are believers. Hopefully he's listening, because he said he listens to us. But one of the things that he's new to Messianic, but with these 4 scriptures, he came up with the idea that Yeshua or Yahweh showed him that the resurrection of the dead is not going to be in the future, that it's happening right now. It's happened since the time of Yeshua, and he says it's called reincarnation. What? I just stood up. I don't argue with these guys no more. I don't, like with Balaam. Don't argue, Paul says to Timothy. I stood up, just gave him, thank you for joining us, hope you come again. I invite him to come today. In fact, interesting that this teaching, I wish he would have been here, because this teaching is about, I didn't know it was going to be Balak. You see how Adonai works? Okay. 1 Timothy 1:18. This command I entrust you, Timothy, my son, in accordance with the prophecies previously made concerning you, and that you fight the good fight, keeping faith and good conscience, which some have rejected and suffered shipwreck in regard to their faith. By the way, some of these, Balaam is an apostate. He would have been a believer, but he apostatized. Most of these false teachers teaching today are apostates. In other words, they were people that were believers. But they rejected the truth, and now they're apostates. And an apostate can never be saved again. He has lost his salvation. He will never be able to be saved again. He will never be able to repent again. They have made shipwreck in regard to their faith. Among them are Hymenaeus and Alexander, who I have handed over to Satan so that they will be taught not to blaspheme. These guys became Alexander was a coppersmith, and he was a believer, and all of a sudden he goes away. By the way, notice that Paul mentions names. Constantly he's naming names. Today, don't mention their name. Paul was not afraid to mention their names. Hymenaeus and Alexander made shipwreck of their faith. These are false teachers. You be warned. Be wary of them. He says to Timothy, he says, be careful with Alexander the coppersmith. Keep away from him. And many times we have to tell you, and if I ever tell you, keep away from this person, or we have to tell someone here or there that has come. The black hatter that was here not too long ago, we had to ask him. In fact, one of you, I think it was Steve, that had to tell him, get away from here, go. And another couple that was sitting right here, they'd always come and sit right there. And it turned out that these guys were from a cult congregation, and while they were here, they were really nice. But we had, they kept telling people, don't listen to what the pastor says. He's teaching wrong. We didn't know about this, but then afterwards, they come and knock at my daughter's house and try to give her some books. And she says, I don't need, they invited her to their congregation. They were actually from another congregation, and they were coming here. And, you need to come to our congregation, and giving her books. And so she gave me the books. That's false prophecy. Those guys were false prophets here in our midst. This, let's go to the next one. 2 Timothy 2:16. 2 Timothy 2:16. But avoid worldly and empty chatter, for it will lead no further. It will lead further to ungodliness, and in their talk will spread like gangrene. Among them are Hymenaeus again, and Philetus, another guy, men who have gone astray from the truth, saying that the resurrection has already taken place, and they upset the faith of some. In fact, that's what this guy was saying, that the resurrection has already taken place. That the resurrection, when you're born again, what it really means is the person in the past has resurrected in your body. The resurrection is taking place every time a new baby is born. What a lie from the devil. Still, these guys are still at it today. And think of it. This guy said, I received the revelation. Well, wait a second. One of the things that I would ask every young person, if you start receiving revelations, please get under a teacher and be taught. I would love to disciple this young man. I would love to disciple some of these people that are out there, and so that you don't become born again and then all of a sudden you're a teacher. You're an apostle. You're a prophet now. 2 Timothy 4:2. Preach the word. Be prepared in season and out of season. Correct, rebuke, and encourage with great patience and careful instruction. For the time will come when men will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. They will turn their ears away from the truth and turn aside to myths. And a lot of people come here, and because of our straightforward teaching and our straight Torah observance, and we will do this, they leave. When we correct them, when you correct, can you imagine if every time you correct your kid, your child, they run away from home and go join the neighbor's house? No. Correction is not against you. Correction is to bring you closer to the way of truth. Titus 1:10. For there are many rebellious men, empty talkers, deceivers, especially those in Judaism, who must be silenced because they are upsetting whole families, teaching things they should not teach for the sake of sordid gain. In fact, this is Judaism. This is rabbinic Judaism. Those that are Judaizers. There's a group of people we call Judaizers. Judaizers are people that say you cannot be saved unless you follow the Torah of Moses. Well, that's not true. Salvation comes from grace through faith in the finished work of Messiah on the cross. The Torah is the result. But Judaizers say you can't be saved unless you do this, this, and this. And they not only talk about the Torah, but they talk about the oral law. They talk about the Mishnah, the Talmud, and that you have to do this and you have to do that, and you can't eat meat and cheese together. Of course you could eat meat and cheese together. Who says you cannot eat meat and cheese together? It is the Judaizers. And you must be circumcised this way. If you're not circumcised this way, or if you do that, or if you do this, you're not saved. And he says they must be silenced. Hebrews 13:9. Do not be carried away by varied and strange teachings. Lunar Sabbath, dual covenant, Ephraimite two-house, sacred name groups. 2 Peter 2:1. But false prophets were among the people, just as there will also be false prophets and teachers among you, who will secretly induce destructive heresies, even denying the master who bought them, bringing swift destruction upon themselves. There are people who have denied the master for this and that. There are people that have denied Yeshua. And one of the things that these people that are from the circumcision, from Judaism, try to do is come into messianic congregations and say, you know what? You guys are still Christians. To really be a believer, you need to come with us. And then they get you involved in their Judaisms. Wait a second. Secretly come. 2 Peter 3:17. You therefore, beloved, knowing this beforehand, be on your guard, so that you are not carried away by the error of unprincipled men and fall from your own steadfastness. 2 Peter 2:1. But there were also false prophets among the people, just as you will have your false prophets and teachers among you. They will secretly induce destructive heresies. By the way, that's what they're called, heresies. A heresy is a false teaching, even denying the sovereign Lord who bought them, bringing swift destruction upon themselves. Many will follow their shameful ways and will bring the truth into disrepute. In their greed, these teachers will exploit you with stories they have made up. Their condemnation has long been hanging over them, and their destruction has not been sleeping. 1 John 4:1. Beloved, believe not every spirit, but test the spirits, to see whether they are of Elohim, because many false prophets are gone out into the world. In fact, we've not only had false prophets, but we have false prophetesses here. Last year, we had a false prophetess that came here and tried to take over and try to do things. We've had false prophets and false teachers come and attack us because some of the things, In fact, we had a false teacher who even wrote me a letter coming against me because I take a salary. Remember a couple of weeks we talked about how ministers in the new covenant are also allowed to if you sow the word, you live by the word. And this person wrote me a letter with like 5, 6 points that we are doing wrong here. This guy's a new messianic young guy and comes with these 6 things that I'm taking a salary, so therefore I'm a false teacher. Well, wait a second. Where does the scripture say that? And so they come against it. So we need to test every spirit. Test every spirit. On the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, everything is said. And the prophetess that we had, it's interesting because watch what 1 Corinthians 14:32 says. And the spirit of the prophet is subject to the prophet. If any man thinks he is a prophet or spiritual, let him acknowledge that the things I write to you are commandments of Yahweh. And one of the things it says there, again, we taught about this afterwards, is that if a woman prophesies, she has to wear a covering, has to be under authority, and there are several things that Paul says. And this person says, I don't believe in that. Well, watch what it says. If a person thinks himself to be a prophet or spiritual, let him acknowledge that the things I write to you are the commandments of Yahweh. Well, it's written there, you can't do this. If you're a prophet, you should acknowledge that, well, that's what Adonai says. And we'll close with one more scripture. Go with me to the book of Acts. And in the book of Acts, chapter 20, Paul is on his last leg going to Jerusalem, and he stops in Miletus in verse 17, 2017. From Miletus he sent for the elders of the Kehillah of Ephesus. When they arrived, he addressed them with these words, and he talks to them, but go with me to verse 28. Be on your guard for yourselves, talking to the elders. That's my responsibility. That's Gilbert's responsibility. That's Dave's. By the way, be praying for Dave and Mr. T and a group that we have today in Clovis. One of the congregations that we sponsor and that we help is in Clovis, New Mexico. Pastor Joe there. And so they are over there kind of encouraging and bringing a word there. So be praying for David, Viola, Richard Chavez, and Rose, and whoever else went with them, that they would be able to encourage the Kehillah in Clovis. Be on your guard, and all the flock of which the Holy Spirit has made you the overseers. We are overseers. The word here in the Greek is episkopos, where we get the word episcopal. In this congregation, we believe in episcopal government, meaning that it's governed by overseers. That's the Hebrew, that's the Greek word and the Hebrew word as well. To feed the flock, the Kehillah of Elohim. To feed it, the word poyain there, to shepherd, to pastor, which he bought with his own blood. I know quite well that when I have gone, fierce wolves will invade you and will have no mercy on the flock, even from your own ranks. And this is the worst thing for a pastor. Even from your own ranks, there will be men coming forward with a travesty of the truth on their lips to induce the disciples to follow them. So be on your guard. This has happened even in our watch. How many times have we've had people that said, I want to be a pastor, I want to be a teacher. And we start teaching them, we start discipling them, and we give them an opportunity to teach. One guy, while I was gone, come up and we thought he was starting another congregation with some of our members, and I confronted him, and of course he denied it, and so I went out to California, and he comes here, and to the congregation he says, just to let you guys know, I'm not starting another congregation. That's all rumors. A week later, someone called and says, you know what? Is so-and-so starting a new congregation? We saw his new congregation on Facebook. What? So I go to the Facebook, and yeah, there's the congregation. There's him. There's members of our congregation there praising Adonai in their little building. So I call him. He says, oh, that's not a congregation. We're just getting together. It turned out that he took 20, 30 people from here. Those groups have already divided into subdivided and subdivided. Fierce wolves, be on your guard. Take care. They will come with a travesty of the truth, even from your own ranks. Several congregations, I can name, which I won't, some of the congregations here in town. One was led by a female rabbi. It was one of my women's leaders. She takes all my elders, takes all kinds of people. She was a false teacher, a false prophet, as has been known now by the evidence. The spirit of Balaam is alive and well in every congregation. It is my prayer that the authority of Adonai, the authority of Moses and Aaron, the authority of David, the authority of Yeshua, most emphatically, but apostolic authority is what we would live our lives by. Let's go ahead and stand. Father, I thank you for the opportunity that we have to be here. And for those that are here, and for those that are listening through the Torah Unleashed Radio Network, for those that are seeing this on YouTube and live stream, I pray, Father, that conviction would come upon everyone who would even now or in the past has been involved in false teachings, false prophecies. Those that are involved in dual covenant, those that are involved in Ephraimite two house, those that are involved in sacred name groups, those that are involved in all these other lunar Sabbaths and all these crazinesses. Bring conviction upon your kehillah, upon every person. Yeverechecha Yahweh vayishmerecha, yir Yahweh panav elecha vichunecha, asa Yahweh panav elecha vayasem lecha. Shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Shalom, shalom. About the dual covenant and some of these heresies. If you want to learn more about these heresies, come on Wednesday and we'll be talking about them.